Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Intercity visit done virtually. I'm Rose Washington, CEO of Tulsa Economic Development Corporation and Chair-elect of the Tulsa Regional Chamber. As many of you know, each fall, the Tulsa Regional Chamber takes a delegation of approximately 100 business leaders, elected officials, educational administrators, young professionals, and regional and tribal partners to a peer city to hear best practices and to discuss topics that are critical to our growth. And these topics span economic development, tourism, government affairs, and community development. During the past decades, many of you in this meeting have joined us in visiting Nashville, Portland, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Fort Worth, among others. And we've learned a great deal each year during each visit. During the COVID-19 pandemic, however, we can't conduct our usual in-person trip. So this year, we're doing the next best thing. We are visiting virtually, and not just one city, multiple cities. Today, you'll hear from experts from 3 cities, Des Moines, Iowa, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Omaha, Nebraska, on the topics of downtown development and river development. If you have questions for our panelists, please enter your name and your company name in the chat feature, and I promise to call on as many of you as possible during the Q&A portion in the second half of today's panel. Before we dive into those topics in more detail with our panelists, I'd like to thank the generous sponsors of this year's virtual Intercity visit. Our presenting sponsor is Nabholz Construction, and our gold sponsor is Beck Design. Speaking on behalf of Nabholz, we're pleased to have with us Michael Feimster, Executive Vice President of Operations for Nabholz. I'll now ask Michael to introduce today's expert panelists.
Well, thank you, Rose. Well, it sure has been amazing working for Rose and with Rose on Project Oasis. She's doing an awesome job here in Tulsa. So thanks again, Rose. So good morning, everyone. Nabholz is thrilled to be today's presenting sponsor, and especially in light of today's topic with downtown and river development. So we continue to be humbled to serve downtown clientele and the community, especially here in Tulsa, by bringing iconic projects to reality, such as OK Pop down in Tulsa Arts District, as well as USA BMX just around the corner, where they're moving their headquarters historically from Phoenix all the way to Tulsa. Pretty exciting for our area. So with that, I'm honored to introduce 3 presenters today that are doing similarly phenomenal things in their city, starting with Tim Leach, who I call Mr. Des Moines. He's the Senior Vice President of Downtown Development for Greater Des Moines Partnership, where his duties include business retention, expansion, and attraction. Tim has been involved in economic development for more than 30 years. His experience includes community development in rural Iowa, extensive economic development work for a public utility, and now working on continued development of Iowa's largest downtown. He's also a graduate, a Hawkeye. We're not going to hold that against you today, Tim. Secondly, we've got Timothy Sheehy. He's the president of Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. Prior to being named president, he was their EVP, and he also served on the board as the Milwaukee Development Corporation. Timothy also serves as the chair of Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation as a director of the State of Wisconsin Investment Board. Cool fact about Tim is he has been asked by three different governors to be the chair for various state commissions. And finally, Holly Barrett. We're so grateful to have Holly here today. She's the executive director of Omaha Downtown Improvement District. She focuses on stimulating economic growth through beautification and activization of public spaces, as well as management of various events, services, and programs aimed at creating a vibrant downtown community for residents, businesses, and visitors to the retail and hospitality venues. She also brings a plethora of experience, 10 years in Denver as part of the lower district or lower downtown of Denver. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Tim Leach, we're going to start with you.
Unmute myself. Great. Can everybody hear me okay? Just a couple thumbs up. That's good. You know, I'm excited to be with you today. I too wish you were here in person. I always enjoy the visits, both when communities come to us and then when we do some benchmarking and look at some other communities that are doing great things in their downtown as well. Right before this, the pandemic, we actually spent some time in Columbus, and Columbus, Ohio is doing some really cool things along their riverfront as well. So just excited to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. As was mentioned, you know, Senior Vice President of Downtown Development, but I got my bones or made my, you know, education in economic development, worked for a public utility company. And, you know, back in the day, we called ourselves smokestacks chasers, and we've certainly come a long way. Downtown development is different. A lot of the principles are the same from economic development, but downtown, you take a more holistic approach. You know, our regional economic development people, for example, won't get involved with retail. They don't do a lot with housing. They're basically, you know, finance, insurance, technology, manufacturing, those types of things. So downtown's been exciting, and it's been exciting to be a part of some really cool projects and some placemaking. And downtown's older, more complicated, a lot of property owners, so it's generally a little more complex, but I think a lot of the principles are the same. I just have some images to kind of guide me along. I will be respectful of my time. If you would go, Morgan, to the first slide, and I want to talk a little bit about the principal Riverwalk. And as a precursor to the principal Riverwalk, in downtown Des Moines, there hadn't been, and then I'm going to go back about 15 years or so, there had really not had been any new residential development in downtown for well over a decade. And I'm talking, this is about, again, 10, 15 years ago. And so we put together a very small fund. In Des Moines, the Des Moines region has a very good, rich history of public-private partnerships. And this is a really good example. We wanted to jumpstart in repopulating our downtown. So we put a fund together with the major corporations. There's about, I'm going to say about 15 entities, individuals that put money in this fund. It wasn't a big fund, but its intention was to try and get some retail development going. And it was also very, very patient money. You know, I joke with people around here, you can write a better deal for yourself, actually. And we started a project called Vine Street Lofts, Water Street Brownstones, right along the river. Really interesting. Again, it wasn't a big fund. It was Sherman and Associates out of Minneapolis who actually won that bid and put a pro forma together that we started down a path with them on construction. And as you know, nothing's ever really easy. We got probably 30-some% into construction of that project, and it burnt out, had a fire. And there's a big debt of gratitude to Sherman and Associates. They, you know, there was what do we do now? It was really an interesting time. But Sherman said we're gonna start over. We're gonna rebuild. So we got that project up and running. And what that project really did is it kind of, in a sense, opened the eyes of the development community here locally and regionally, because they got to see how a financial stack that has all different kind of layers. For the developers that might be on the call, you know, you might get a check out. We built that pro forma on $1 a square foot on the rentals, and that's just so you can tell, you know, right off the bat there's going to be a lot of gap. So why did I start with that? We hadn't had housing development. We haven't had for well over a decade, and we needed to get that started. The easiest, most efficient way to make neighborhoods clean and safe is to populate. But what that sparked was a relook at the river, and you know, one of our largest corporations, great community partner, Principal Financial Group, and took a plan to do another P3 project along with the city and the state and themselves, and put together a plan for the Principal Riverwalk. And that was to put about a 1.5, just under a 1.5 mile loop around the river, and see if we could. And this, one of the signatures, of course, the Women Achievement Bridge. There's also an old railroad bridge that was made into refurbished into a pedestrian bridge, linked up all the trails, and it was a precursor to Brenton Skating Plaza. And it was all designed as a placemaking project to start bringing focus back to downtown and focus to the river. Brenton Skating Plaza is an ice skating rink. Later, that particular Riverwalk project added about a $500,000 canopy to the skating rink, so it could be used in the warmer months for events, concerts, weddings, and those types of things. But the Riverwalk was completed in 2013, took 8 years, and at a cost of about $70 million. But as a riverfront development goes, you start by saying, what do we need? And it was a residential population that we hadn't had in downtown. Residential product we really hadn't had in downtown for quite some time. And then it starts sparking people's imagination. What can we do with this underutilized asset? You can go to the next slide, please, Mark. So this is one of the newest ones, and this is on the east side of the river, called the Market District. And again, there's a lot of public space that's being programmed here. About 260 acres. It's old industrial. It did not have adequate sanitation, sewer, water in that area. It was a lot of older industrial buildings. The Market District now has most of the property in very friendly hands and a couple partners' hands. Our Mid-American Energy is part of that, and they will be part of building, a public park that will seat about 5,000 people, with an indoor piece that has about 2,500 people. And we're talking mixed use. There's already one apartment developer that will build apartments of about 6 to 9 stories. 20% of those will be workforce housing. And the whole district, as it's planned, has about is calculated $750 million project. But the interesting thing, right now, that 260 acres is valued, assessed at about $677,000. And so at the end, when it's completely built out, we estimate the assessed value to be $245 million. So quite an undertaking. It's really exciting. Couple of elements. This is designed to be as sustainable as possible. We're using, in fact, our operation downtown, our downtown bid is working with them now on how do you maintain bioswales and all of the planting and sustainable elements of this particular development. So we're really excited about that. The development team has done a tremendous job to get to the area they are now. So go to the next one slide, please, Morgan. And this is the LAURIDSEN skate park, named after the family that sparked the capital investment for this. This is going to be one of the largest skate parks in the country. When it's completed, it's about done. If one of the things that I like best about the skate park, or one of the things that intrigued us when we were first working on it, somebody mentioned that if you do not have a skate park, then your city and your downtown becomes a skate park. So, I think this one with the skatable art, you can see the wow, that feature is in now. It's scheduled to open. It is 80,000 square feet of park space. It kind of follows the contours of the river. It enhances the riverfront. It is on the west side of the river, and just to the west is our arena district, Wells Fargo Arena. So that's an exciting project that should be live yet this year. And again, it's right along that principal Riverwalk. So you can go to the next slide. That would be good. And you get into Central Iowa Water Trails. That is 150 miles of waterways. It's all throughout Central Iowa. It'll have 86 different access points. It is a regional initiative, but downtown will kind of be the center of an adventure park. You would have kayaking, surfing, potentially zip lining, outdoor activities. The project elements include, certainly conservation, enhanced in-stream habitat, fishing nodes. So anything you can think about doing along the river, and things that we wouldn't think about in Central Iowa. For example, surfing. That one is interesting to me. The consultants that did the economic impact and feasibility, think that for every one person that's using it, kayaking, surfing, zip lining, there'll be 8 people watching it. And the year one, it's estimated to have about 1.25 million visits in the first year once we get the whole thing put together. Some of the pieces regionally are under construction now. We were well on our way in the fundraising pre-pandemic, starting to pick that back up again. But that is one of those, that is a big game changer for riverfront development for our downtown, and connects a lot of our region as well. And then finally, before I turn it over, I just wanted to mention that we're working towards a USL professional soccer stadium. Des Moines that would put Des Moines as probably the minor league city, has every major sport minor league wise. The soccer stadium is proposed to take up about 9 acres, seat 6,000 at about a cost of $60 million. But I put this one in there. This one is it's a really great project, but it's pivoted here recently because we have been working for over 25 years to get control of what is called the DICO site. DICO site is a Superfund site. It's right next to where the soccer stadium was proposed, but it's 56 acres. It's just been abandoned. There's some rusted out buildings. There's some monitoring wells. It has been a long journey to get that property. And just as of September 13th of this year, the city, DICO is going to pay the EPA fine, and the city is going to take and then donate that land to the city. And already the soccer stadium says, okay, if that property, you can only build on top of that property, we can slide that soccer stadium over. And the developers that are interested in doing that are also interested in doing that soccer stadium there instead of, and then using the land that they had purchased for further mixed use development. I can't tell you, that's a huge deal. That has been tied up for years and years. And it's our annual DC trip. The last one that we did live, so 2019, one of our development companies had a chance to sit down with Senator Grassley, said, what can you do to help us as a community? Senator Grassley asked, can you get the community back a letter and ask us for some assistance? So we put together a letter, had about every CEO, mayor, supervisor in town sign that letter and send it to Grassley's office. I don't know if that ultimately did any good, but it is awfully coincidental that after 25 years, once that happened, now that's going to be in development friendly hands. A lot of things have to happen, but it is really good news because it's right at the entrance into our downtown from the south and west, and it's fairly unsightly, and to have it turned around into something that's useful, that's going to spark further mixed use development is huge for us. So with that, I think that's kind of some high level projects in downtown along the riverfront, and I'll turn it over back over to Rose and or Michael rather, and sit back and listen to the others.
So this is Tim Sheehy. I'm following Tim here. I'm going to talk a little bit about Milwaukee. I've been running the chamber since 1992, so I've been a long-term colleague of Mike's. And when he says jump, I say how high. So happy to be here. I'm going to kind of do this in 3 phases. I want to talk a little bit about Milwaukee's riverfront develop, the assets that we have, what we did with them, and how it was done. And so the first point I'm going to make, I think, is you're planning your future, it's really, really important to understand your history. So I'm going to zip you through Milwaukee's history and the development from 1840 to 2020 in about 2 minutes here. So if you look at this picture, it really says a lot about Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's name is really derived from the Ojibwa tribe's meaning for Milwaukee, which is gathering place by the waters. So we sit as a natural harbor on Lake Michigan, the largest freshwater lake in the US, at the confluence of 3 major rivers. So water really is an asset for us. Go ahead next, Morgan. So we started out as a French fur trading post, which gave way to Milwaukee as a transportation hub. Go ahead. And that transformed us into an industrial center. And if you think about the strife between being an industrial center and using the river for things like fishing and swimming, what eventually happened over time is that industrial transport and industrial effluent, unfortunately, eventually won out over fishing and swimming in terms of the use that we have as a river. Go ahead. And so the first major point here is that in 1993, really championed by the chamber, we spearheaded a $3 billion investment that included a big chunk of federal funding to clean up our waterways. And the key way in which we did that was by investing over $1 billion in 20 miles of a tunnel system that was dug 300 feet below the surface to create a deep tunnel system to handle sewer overflows and surface runoff. It was immensely controversial at the time, expensive, but when we look back, it's really helped reduce about 99% of our sewer overflows and surface runoff, both into Lake Michigan and into the 3 rivers that make up Milwaukee. So once the river started to refresh itself and the lake was in a cleaner position, go ahead. We worked to develop a public-private partnership called the RIVERWALK District. And it established using private dollars that were contributed through business improvement district and tax incremental financing to develop the river, which had really, quite frankly, become the backside of the city, and turned it into a ribbon of front door water space. And so what you're looking at now is part of a pedestrian promenade that runs from the harbor about 20 blocks up the Milwaukee River. And once that kind of front door was created with that pedestrian walkway, go ahead, it really led to an organic explosion of refurbished, reclaimed, rebuilt, and built new housing along the river. And then, of course, that was followed by commercial and entertainment spaces. And so go ahead, next slide. And you can see from the river development and the condo development, which has really taken up both sides of the river, as I said, for almost 20 blocks, and redeveloped and reclaimed almost every space that was available along the river today. And once we had people kind of recreating and living downtown, go ahead, you can run the next slide. It started to attract corporate investment downtown. This is a brand new headquarters that's under construction. You can see right away along the river, right next to housing and boat slips. Go ahead, next. It's led recently to, this is the new development. This is the largest investment Komatsu has made outside of Japan. About $250 million on a new corporate headquarters, again, right on the river, right on the harbor. Go ahead. And then Manpower, our largest publicly traded company, built their headquarters again right along the river. And so that industrial cleanup led to residential, which now has led to commercial. Go ahead, next slide. But in addition to reclaiming the river, we also reclaimed industrial land that was contaminated again along the river, and it's become home for two of our better known brands. So this is a project that the Chamber led the development of. This is our brand new forum for the Milwaukee Bucks, which sits about a half a block off the river. A great multi-purpose facility and home to the Milwaukee Bucks. Go ahead, next slide. And then further down the river, another project that we worked very hard in the legislature to get financing for is Miller Park. And if you could look out over the center field wall, you would see it sits right along one of the rivers, one of the three rivers in Milwaukee. So all of this is contained in the downtown area and really been helpful to revitalizing the downtown as a commercial center, as a residential center, as a place to live, obviously, and a place to learn. And then the last slide I'll have you click to is again a look at Milwaukee's lakefront. And so in summary, when you think about this, metropolitan Milwaukee is about 1.8 million people. We've got about 600,000 residents in the city of Milwaukee. But for the purposes of this presentation, what's really interesting is this Riverwalk revitalization and development has really led to, over the last decade, a 30% increase in downtown residents. We now have 34,000 people living in a relatively small area of downtown that accounts for 2% of the city's land mass, but 23% now of its property value. So as I leave this picture up here with Milwaukee, I just want to touch on a couple of key decision points that helped us reclaim and repurpose our waterfronts. And the first one clearly is an investment in the environmental remediation and what it really meant to improving the livability of the city. And the key lesson we learned here is not to alienate the industrial users who were benefiting from their proximity to the water, their use of the water, and returning their effluent. And so we had a real balancing act between what we called the wet industries, which relied on the water, and the dry industries who were not using the water but wanted to be proximate to it, and developing a good mechanism to cost share the investment in the environmental cleanup. The second item I want to talk about is, again, that Riverwalk development, which is a private-public partnership. And I purposely reversed those two because I think it's important to have the private sector lead this in partnership with the public. And so this bid district to fund the walkability and create access to the river really came about by us doing a best practice, kind of like what you're doing. And we started to look at how cities in Europe were developing along their riverways, and using that as a vision to help develop Milwaukee's Riverwalk, put cafes on it, make it livable, and really make it front-facing. The third point I'd make is just connecting the dots between live, work, play, and learn. they all fuel each other, and keeping a vision in mind that brings all those to play is really important. Obviously, a big opportunity for us because we have Major League Sports to get those arenas situated proximate to the downtown and along the rivers. And then the final thing I'll say is going back to the smokestack chasing that Tim made is when you have a real estate palette like this, it just makes a great place to attract companies and to get them to expand when they see this combination of amenities. So let me wrap up here quickly by talking about how we did it and the lessons that we learned. So I think the first lesson that I've learned sitting in this chair for a long time is that it's really hard to see far enough in the future to be visionary. So I think it's really incumbent on any community, and especially its chamber, to make the physical development of the community a purposeful part of the chamber's agenda. And you can never look far enough out to do that. I think the second is that the private-public partnership goals are really important. In lots of our communities, we get into fighting within the community. And I think this is a really good chance to just remind everybody that the competition is not between downtown and the suburbs or between one part of a state or the other. The competition is really outside our own states and our own metro areas. That's really who we're competing with. The third point is that there is a real link to your development of your natural assets, your river, and making it a stickier place for talent. And at the end of the day, that's the business that we're in, I think, is really making this a sticky place to retain, recruit, and advance talent. And if you take care of your assets and develop them right, it's going to have that benefit. Fourth point, I guess, is think big, but don't outrun the market. And as the line from the song says, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. And so you always have to be mindful of the market's ability to, I think, lead and develop what you want to have as a city. And those two have to stay in some kind of link, or we end up, and I've got examples of that in Milwaukee, where we had a great vision, but there was no market underpinning for it, and it really didn't pan out. And then the last point I'll leave you with is we had the foresight 20 or 25 years ago to set up in the chamber a nonprofit community development corporation, which we call the Milwaukee Development Corporation. So we use that as a tool to develop, to own, to partner, and to guide long range and catalytic development in the community, where we take a partner with a for-profit developer in a space that's going to take a really long time to develop, be patient about it, get a return, and then use that evergreen return to fund what we do next. So at any rate, I hope this was helpful in giving you a quick oversight in one of the ways that Milwaukee has used its waterfronts to advance its vision and develop its community. So happy to stick around for the questions, and thank you for the time.
Thanks, Tim. I'm Holly Barrett. I'm just going to jump right in. I'm a little intimidated taking my cute little mid-sized city up against some of these bigger guys who have gone before me. But we are in the midst of doing some amazing things out here in Omaha. And we've really been looking at our larger partners and sister cities as our guides. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Morgan. Thank you. I've been in Omaha for about 6 years. I've been doing this kind of work for about 20. As Michael said earlier, I was in Denver for a long time. I'm from Denver, and I was there in their historic district. And when I moved out here to Omaha, it was kind of a shock. Omaha had developed at a much slower speed than some of the other big cities that I had been in. But they had done it very conscientiously, very project by project, which fits the culture here very well. It's very slow, and then there will be huge upticks as people jump on bandwagons and see the successes of things. And downtown Omaha has sort of flown along in the last 10 years and has really progressed from being nothing but commercial and retail spaces to really being a very mixed use city. And it's been a lot of fun to be a part of that. A lot of these guys that you're hearing from before, the Tims, they are focused on development. And those are the key factors that really are moving things forward. My position is more following the development and making sure that the public realm is staying cohesive and that everything is speaking to each other so that our neighborhood remains seamless. We are a smaller city where we are about 75 blocks, my district, which is not big compared to Milwaukee for sure, and even Des Moines. But what we do have is a really incredible philanthropic community. This is my favorite story. I was here in Omaha for about a week, and my mentor was dragging me around and introducing me to various people. And she said at the last minute, I'm going to take you to this meeting that I have to go to. We're raising money for a library. It's with some of the major funders in town. I'm not going to introduce you. You're just going to sit there. So I go in, I sit down, and these 5 old guys in normal clothes come in. And then there's one guy comes in wearing ripped up jeans and a muddy t-shirt, and I don't recognize any of them. And this guy sits down and he says, well, I'll throw in one. And then all the others said, well, okay, I'll throw in one. And he says, all right, there's your $6 million. And he gets up and he walks out, and she says, well, that's Warren Buffett, and he came from mowing his lawn. And that's kind of the way things happen here. The city owns a lot of land and doesn't have a lot of money to put into things. And the philanthropic community really bands together and sort of drives things and makes them happen. And we are blessed that a lot of our philanthropic entities are huge visionaries. So our riverfront has been under development for a lot of years, and it's been through a lot of different iterations. It was like Tim Sheehy was saying before me, it was mostly steel industry and iron industry. And when the industry left and the city bought the property, the environmental remediation that they did basically just went down about 50 feet, and they just capped it. And that worked real well for it to be public space for a long time, but it really has not lent itself well to development. And because there were some major detractors in our city, such as our highway comes right down to the edge of our river and cuts through the center of our downtown, and in effect kind of cuts downtown off from our riverfront. The Riverfront Park was not, it was hard to get to. It's walkable, but if you don't know where you're going, or if you're not a dedicated exerciser, you're not going to walk down there. There wasn't a lot of parking. There weren't any destinations. There wasn't a reason to go down. So we've been looking at it and trying to figure out what we're going to do. And looking at some of these other cities, our limitations are that we aren't really able to sell it to a private entity who could afford to do the full environmental remediation. So we had to sort of deal with what we had and build from there. So what happened was that Warren Buffett and 5 of his best buddies got together and said, this has to happen. And they started working with some major developers and landscape architects, park designers from all over the world. They traveled everywhere from Des Moines to Copenhagen to look at various parks. And it was an extensive process. It was very cool. And then they came back and they presented a $500 million plan and said, this is what we want to do. And everybody said, oh, that's fantastic. It's on city land. The city only had to put in about 50 to 80 million, depending on where the project sits, on a various days. So the bulk of it's really coming from our private development, and it is going to become a world-class park. They are fixing all of the connections that made it difficult to get down. We're rerouting things, and they're building destinations, which is what we really need. I think, Tim, you just coined a phrase for me. I hadn't heard the live, work, play, learn tagline. So I'm going to start adding learn to ours, because that's one of the things that our downtown is really lacking. We are lacking a church. We are lacking schools. We are lacking all of those amenities that make it so that families can live down here. So we fall prey, that a lot of cities fall prey to. We fall prey to the problem of having a lot of young folks and a lot of elderly folks. But the folks that are right in the middle of their lives and that are starting families, those are the ones that are leaving and going back to the suburbs. And Omaha has an incredible family community, and the suburban community is very tight. So, so that works well for our city, but it's not working well for downtown. So one of the things that we are looking at is building recreational centers and places where we can bring students down. We'd love to have a community building that could be used as a church or a synagogue or a mosque or for whatever else it could be, an event center that could be very, very multi-purpose. We are right in the middle of all of this. So if you could actually go back to the previous slide, Morgan. This is the park, which is the downtown Central Park, and it's connected to the riverfront. In the past, this top photo, we were using the river as sort of a piece of art. We had the river actually come up into the center of downtown. And it was this beautiful, wonderful place of reflection. And I live right over this area. So I loved looking at the waterway every day, but it made it so that you couldn't cross the park at any given place. So again, we were creating disconnections in the middle of our historic district and entertainment district, our central business district, and our north downtown, which was really developing into a true mixed use neighborhood with a lot of residents and so on and so forth. So one of the things that they did is they have come in and they are bringing this up to street level right now, or I should say, originally when it was built in the 70s, it was about 3 stories down, and it created kind of a grotto. And again, it was intended to create this lovely reflective space. And what it really did was create kind of a dark, scary space that nobody wanted to go to, and that you couldn't possibly keep well lit enough. So, so they brought it up to street level. That bottom slide, the one in the middle, is actually a picture that I took yesterday morning from my bedroom window. This is the construction site. They are putting in trees and all sorts of fabulous things. The bottom is a rendering of what it will look like. And again, this is going to be right through the center, and there will still be a water attraction because clearly we need that. We have 2-story slides that are in the center of the park, and they have been there since the 70s, and they are iconic and fabulous. So we're refurbishing those. All of the land on either side of this park is kind of up for grabs right now. So there's huge development opportunities all around it. One of the downfalls, however, is that 4 of the 5 major development sites that are really around this key spot are owned by the city or the state, which can be very, very difficult. They are not in the business of development. And so they are having to sort of step out of their comfort zone and do things that are hard for them. So it's both a detractor and a real huge opportunity. Go ahead to the next one, and then go ahead to the last one. So one of the things that my organization is really working on is literally being a liaison between the developers, the city who owns all of the land, and then of course the community, trying to make sure that that everybody is seeing this as an opportunity and that is understanding the nature of what we're trying to do. I think, looking at both Tim Leach and Tim Sheehy's projects, we've got a long way to go before we're going to be Milwaukee, but Des Moines, we're coming for you. We are, the Riverfront Park that we are developing is absolutely going to be public space that is mostly going to hopefully be outdoor activation. But we're putting cafes in there. We're trying to build these destinations. Again, we're looking at this community center that could be a potential use of all sorts of different things. Downtown Omaha is a home to 4 of our major Fortune 500 companies, which is very exciting. We've got Union Pacific, Berkshire Hathaway. We still have a huge presence of ConAgra right there on the riverfront, even though they've moved their headquarters to Chicago. And then we also have a number of Fortune 1000 companies. TD Ameritrade built the stadium, which you can see sort of in the background with those blue lights. They built that. We are the home of the NCAA World Series. And then we play host to a whole bunch of other things as well. Our convention center is also the home, and the convention center you can also see right next to those blue lights. That we are also the home to the Olympic swim trials and all sorts of major sporting events. So as our city is growing, we are our motto right now from our chamber is quite lovely. It's "We don't coast," meaning we certainly don't have the advantages that some of the major cities have on the coast, but we are right in the center of the country. And so we are a really great place to stop for conventions and visitors. And we're kind of a hidden gem. No one knows we're here. When I left Denver, everybody said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, come visit Omaha, because we have everything Denver has, all of the beautiful, wonderful restaurants and public art, and no one knows we're here." So we've got all sorts of, we don't have the traffic. We don't have a lot of the issues that some of the other big cities are dealing with. So we're sort of riding on that right now and enjoying being kind of a hidden gem, and looking at some of the bigger cities around us and watching what they're doing, and then looking to our philanthropic community and our very receptive city to bringing some of these really fabulous opportunities to light. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back for questions at this point. But thank you so much for letting me be part of it. And it was fantastic to see the other presentations. So thanks for putting it together, Jim and Morgan.
Holly, Tim, and Tim, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. It's really interesting to hear how you've capitalized on your natural resources and the partnerships in your communities to advance your vision for river development and downtown development. I also appreciate you sharing some of the obstacles and opportunities. I want to ask I have a couple of questions, and if it's okay, I'm going to just ask. Tim, you talked about using TIFs and bids as a way to finance some of the special projects downtown. I'd like to ask all of you, and Holly, we can start with you, what you think the single biggest thing a community can do to support downtown development.
Guess I should unmute myself. I think the biggest thing that our community can do, and especially in Omaha, where we have, I think somebody else said it, you know, downtown is full of lots of small property owners. And so there are a lot of different voices that need to be heard. And I think right now, the biggest, most important thing that our folks can do is to pay attention and to work with the developers and speak to them, and then go be present at planning boards and pay attention to the transit-oriented development that's happening. All of the things that developers can do to make their spaces inviting for the rest of the community. I think we should be encouraging them to do that.
Thank you. Tim and Tim.
Well, I can certainly go next. I really think the most important thing a community can do for their downtown is to recognize that it's not, at least for us, it's regional. We're not big enough to fight amongst each other. I can go back in, the 20 years I've been in this seat and look at office space, for example, and look at vacancy rates. And when downtown is doing really well, our suburbs are doing really well, and vice versa. And I think once the partnership was established, understanding that downtown, it's everybody's downtown. I think that's one of the biggest things, is to take pride in your downtown. I had a former mayor, Preston Daniels, who told me, maybe my first week in this job, something that I've remembered, and it's, great states have great capital cities, and great capital cities have great downtowns. And if you take it from we want everybody in the state of Iowa to be proud of the work and the development and the companies and with the, what everybody has done to lift it up and recognize there's more to do, and the placemaking that can happen right in your central city along your rivers is a key component to that pride. But I think everybody's got to embrace the downtown.
And I think I just add to that there are lots of purposes for a downtown, but representing the business community, it's a direct link to our ability to recruit and retain the talent that our companies are going to need to compete in a global economy. And so we need to look at the downtown from that perspective as a business community. And as I said, link those live, work, play, and learn pieces together. If we can use the downtown to make this a more attractive place, again, to recruit, retain, and develop talent, then we're going to get the corporate investment that follows. If we don't, then we're going to leak jobs and leak more growth opportunities to the other markets that are doing that. And I think it's especially important given the impact of COVID and the flexibility now people have to live where they don't work. And if you can't compete in that environment, you're going to slide back down the scale.
So thank you all for responding to that question. Another question relates to other cities that you visited for best practices, just as we're engaging with you. What communities do you look to as role models for downtown and river development? And Tim, from Milwaukee, I know you talked about cities in Europe. I wonder if there are some you can, others you can share along with Tim and Holly.
You know, the cities in Europe we've looked at?
Just in general, you mentioned that you visited, I thought you said you visited some cities in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different way. Europe was just a different way. I mean, one of the things I always talk about is if you look at a cafe in Europe, everybody sitting in the seat is facing out towards the road. And you look in the US and everybody sits facing inward. So it's just a different way to look at how people experience and utilize their downtowns and how compact they are. And so again, I could go from, you know, Denver to Minneapolis, and, you know, we look at some of the more cold weather markets we do because of the impact that has on how you utilize downtown, how much your development needs to be at street level, all sorts of other things that go to impact the way a downtown develops. So I think it's both aspirational in terms of who's using a specific piece of or developing a specific piece really well, and then other markets that have similar attributes in terms of size, weather, and just proximity to the natural assets.
Thank you. Tim or Holly, you want to share some of those cities you see as role models, other than Tulsa?
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, I think, you know, we've done, I mentioned Columbus earlier, or most recently, but if there's a city or metro area, again, we kind of concentrate on those that we, you know, we like to consider, you know, peers, big brothers, big sisters. That, you know, for Riverwalk, we went and looked at some place, or excuse me, for water trails, we went and looked at some places that had done some of these amenities and placemaking projects. So it's a lot about benchmarking. Who's doing what you want really, really well. I'll give you a great example. When we built Wells Fargo Arena, we did not put a convention hotel next to it. We just completed that project here, 3-4 years ago. But one of the cities that we visited was Omaha. Omaha's done an incredible job with their arena and the hotel rooms they have around it. In fact, we met with some officials in Omaha, and they themselves could not believe that we put up a arena without a hotel on it. So, you know, we were a little behind in some of those things. So if you look project by project, you can find somebody that's doing what you're looking to do, that's doing it better or doing it well, lessons learned and those types of things from those cities. Anyway, I'd turn it over to Holly.
Well, you know what, Tim, we look at Des Moines a lot, so, you know, we should probably get together. You know, I'm surprised that no one has said San Antonio, because clearly that San Antonio Riverwalk is one of the most well-developed in the country, for sure. we did look at San Antonio, even though it was not even aspirational. There was no way that we were going to be able to recreate that kind of an experience. But for my organization, because we really do take care of the public realm, and what our main job to do is keep it clean, safe, and active, San Antonio Riverwalk, it has its own entity. It has its own cleaning teams, its own security teams, its own activation teams that are focused on nothing but the events that are happening down there, and so on and so forth. So that was one of the things that our Riverfront Revitalization Group decided to do, is that they looked at some of those other cities, San Antonio for sure, and created a riverfront district that they are building a management team for that will be specific for that. And, you know, we didn't do a lot of talking about programming our public spaces, but we all alluded to it. That is one of the things that if you're not building a destination like an arena or a major restaurant or something like that, you still have to have reasons for people to come down, not just those passive activators like nice seating and, you know, maybe some ball fields and that kind of stuff, but events and reasons for people to come down. And so we looked at a lot of small cities, a lot of our peer cities when we were starting to do this, and Denver was one of them. Denver did a really great job of redeveloping their riverfront so that it was chunks of public space right next to corporate headquarters, and then building living space and retail and hospitality sort of in and around it, so that the public spaces became intertwined with all of these, and they became active almost 24 hours a day with pedestrians and users and that kind of stuff. And I think that we ultimately would love to see that happen, but that is definitely far in the future. But we definitely, Tim, look at Des Moines as a city that is not just a peer, but is starting to do some things that we want to follow. But we definitely, our hotel and convention center have put us on the map for conventions, particularly that tier just under the real big ones. We get looked at first. Our cost of living is real low. We have a great transit system in downtown. And it is really nice to have a hotel right next to the convention center, right next to the entertainment districts and the restaurants and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we were able to host a NC2A basketball regional, I think the year after Omaha did. I actually was at the one in Omaha to kind of check it out. And they would not have come back a second time had we not had that hotel. They basically told us that. So we look at Omaha and cities that we consider peer and consider competitors. And again, everybody's in this business. Everybody's nice to show you what they're doing. And if you go project by project, that's the way to do it. These intercity visits. Because I think when, you know, for example, we went to Columbus and we found out they do a lot of the same things we do. So what are they doing that we do that you can, and they're taking it a step further? That's one thing to look at. And what are they doing that you're not doing, especially if it's something that you have an asset that's underutilized and they've got the same type of asset and they're further down the road than you are. Those are always good visits to me.
Okay, so we are about out of time. Thank you for entertaining my questions. And I know that our sponsor, NABHOS, has a question. Michael, I can see you have a question brewing there. And can you just make it a lightning round?
Yeah, thank you, Rose. So Holly, Tim, wonderful presentations. Thanks so much. Kind of our final question that really for you is what do you see as the biggest development opportunity within the next decade within your communities?
Well, I mean, it's an obvious one in Milwaukee, since we just finished investing $500 million in a new NBA arena downtown that has probably we have a goal of developing $500 million around it. So it's right off the river. There's space proximate that the old arena was on that was taken down, and vacant space. And so just sitting in the gem of the city, that's just a really obvious place to focus on development, whether it's, and again, do it with not just one thing, but do it with commercial, do it with hotel, and do it with residential. So we continue that mantra of focusing on talent as we develop out the downtown.
I'll jump in. I think our biggest opportunity, I alluded to the fact that our major park that's being redeveloped has 5 sites to be developed around it. And I think those could be a huge opportunity as far as really driving us forward. I think some of our other opportunities are our entertainment venues. We've got some folks that are really pouring some money into our performance centers and all of that. And I think really looking at those kinds of opportunities as huge gems will be fantastic. I also want to say that we have lots of little development going on around downtown. All of the neighborhoods directly adjacent to us are being built up very, very quickly in very small ways, but very organic ways. And we're seeing a lot of really interesting and unique things happen. So I think watching the diverse neighborhoods around us developing is going to be a huge opportunity for downtown. And last but not least, Omaha is in the middle of doing a master plan. We're presenting it to City Council for transit-oriented development. And that, I think, is going to be a game changer, especially for these 5 sites that I'm talking about that are downtown. These are prime for a headquarters or a major mixed-use area. And I think getting our city ready to actually be a more transit-focused city is only gonna do well. This is the world that we are moving into. And so I think supporting that is gonna be great.
Well, again, before Michael, Rose, Jim, Morgan, thank you so much for having us today. And Tim and Holly, thank you for being part of this as well. I really, I spent a couple minutes talking. That DICO site, I mean, you think about 25 years standing, basically on the sideline watching the corporation and the EPA, battle it out, and you're trying to develop your downtown all around it. And now, just within the last couple of weeks to finally get movement and control of that site. And then within that 2-week period, to have a project like this USL Pro Soccer Stadium is really exciting for us. I think the opportunity for that particular site, the Market District, and some of the others that I mentioned, have an opportunity for us to connect and make sure that we're the seamless connection between the neighborhoods. People had talked about that earlier. We have some great developments in our downtown, but they can seem a little lily pad like, and we're trying to develop our neighborhoods to get seamless and walkable between them. But this DICO one is huge. It's a quarter of a century in the making, and then in 2 weeks, once we get control, in 2 weeks there's a viable project for it. So we're really excited about it.
Wonderful. Well, once again, Tim, and Holly, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and expertise. I hope we appreciate you very much, and hopefully one day soon we'll see you in person in your city. Again, I'd like to thank Nabholz Construction and Beck Design for their generous support of our Intercity virtual panel series. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.